And, when we use words like, hey, be more idealistic, or, utopia is a word that we've used in this conversation. I can't help but think Christmas, a lot of times, it's not always a joy for everyone. It can bring up grief and loneliness or stress. And how can we kind of honor these aspects of the human experience during the holiday season while also, as I mentioned earlier, give utopia a chance and lean into this economy of abundance and idealism?
Well, you have to understand this is basic, that life is full of joy and full of pain. That's just the way it is. And at Christmas, it's interesting that we approach Christmas through the darkest night of the year. So this is another important connection with Christmas, is that it takes place at the solstice. And that's when the sun is least present to us. And the sun is not just there to give us physical warmth. The sun can make you feel alive and happy. A friend of mine just told me the other day, if he gets up in the morning and the sun is shining, he's ready to go. And if the sun isn't shining, he wants to stay in bed. He doesn't want to get into life. So we have to remember that. Light comes in the darkness. We're celebrating the birth of light at Christmas, and all that image of the manger with an infant. And you don't have to take that historically. You can take it as, again, another aspect of the myth of Christmas, is that light itself is being born. And we see in many paintings of the Nativity, there's light coming from the child or light coming from the little barn they're in. That light is meaningful. That light means something because that is a celebration of light. Light coming after the whole year has grown so dark that there's hardly any light left. At least that's what some of us feel. I live in New Hampshire. I really feel it. There's not much light left in December, and you can feel it. You just wish that we had longer days. Well, that's part of it. So we are close to our pain, close to the darkness that is part of life. But that's why the coming of light is so valuable and important. It's something we want to celebrate at Christmas.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the prologue of John's Gospel. This light has come in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. That is such a mystical passage in Scripture, and you quote it twice in your book.
Well, that's a remarkable mystical passage in the Gospel. So I think what that opening is saying to us is that in the beginning, to begin with, was the Logos. That's what the Gospel says. The Logos is a word that I don't translate. I have translated all the Gospels. So I've published a translation of the Gospels. And in my translation of that, I can't remember it exactly. I don't have it with me, but it is that to begin was the Logos. Sometimes they say the beginning was the Word. That's how they translate Logos. It does mean word, but it means something much deeper. It means the way things are. It means this is how things work. This is how life is, Logos. That's what this is. We have our word logic from it, but it's much more than logic. So I keep the word Logos, the Greek word, because it's a mystical word. In the beginning was the Logos. That means that in the beginning, this world had meaning. It had Logos to it. It had Logos in it. And the Logos was divine. And when we talk about God and divinity, we are talking partly about this source of a meaningful world we live in. It's not chaos. And that's amazing. A lot of religions begin their stories of origin by saying that the world is not chaotic. That's so important. There's order here, and we are part of that order. So part of our job is to find the Logos in ourselves as human beings. What does it mean to be a human being? How do they work? And also our own selves individually. I'm Tom. How does Tom work? What is Tom's Logos?
Mm.
That's the question. So that's, I think, at the be in my translation is, and the darkness doesn't darken. The darkness that is here doesn't extinguish us. We can live in darkness because we do have some source of light, but that doesn't mean that we can't live in the dark, because the dark doesn't have to undo us. And at Christmas time, we realize that we've gone through this advent of darkness, the days getting shorter and shorter, where you wonder if there's any sun left. And then suddenly it all turns around. Solstice. The solstice means, the word means that the sun stands still. And so the sun stands still, and then it turns and starts growing. So that's a wonderful time to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, you mentioned in this darkness, we are particularly close to our pain. And yet, as we just talked about, the light is still there. You've got a background in psychotherapy, and I'm wondering, what kind of therapeutic direction might you give to someone who perhaps struggles to find the beauty or magic of Christmas because of the holidays' association with pain, trauma, or loss, this darkness that we're talking about? Anything in your therapy background that you think might be helpful for listeners?
Sure, absolutely. All of therapy, at least the way I understand it, has to be not trying to create a life that is all light, where everything works out fine. No, you can't do that. So therapy is to try to embrace the sad things that happen, the mistakes that are made, and embrace those and acknowledge them. And maybe even understand, in many cases, if not all, how they play a role in your unfolding, just as the more positive and the happier things do. We don't have to choose one thing against the other. That has been part of religious understanding for centuries, that there's good and there's evil, and they're in a fight with each other. You don't have to look at it that way. And I think that's what I'm trying to say about Christmas. You celebrate the solstice. What I really appreciate, and I've lived in Ireland quite a bit in my life, and one of the things that I've done many times in Ireland is go to Newgrange, which is a prehistoric. Well, I don't know if prehistoric is the word. It's 5,000 years old temple, sort of, and you can go and visit it now. People go on the solstice day, and they can go, and you have to crawl inside you really have to get down on your knees to get in it. And you feel these very smooth but incredibly powerful boulders that form this little entryway. It's just like a little triangular entry. You crawl through it, and you feel it rubbing against your shoulders. I'm claustrophobic myself, but somehow it doesn't bother me. And I go through this little entryway, and then you go through a little lower place, and then finally end up in a chamber inside this thing, which is a wonderful thing to be in this chamber in the earth. And it looks like it's set up as a little temple, a little chapel. I mean, it's not made this way. It's natural stone and everything. But as you're there, if you're there on the 21st of the month of December, most years it's that date, and you see the sunrise when the solstice has the sun return. The sun at this temple is built in such a way that the sunlight comes into the temple only on that day. And that's the celebration of the sun coming in. Now, that's pretty impressive. And if you are mystical minded, or even psychologically minded in a deep way, you'll say, "Oh, this is my life. My life is always in darkness, but there are always opportunities for this life, for the sun to show itself and to come in and enter into my space and to give me light." So that Christmas is celebrated one day of the year, as the solstice is. But it can actually be part of our life all the time. So the sun is always rising and always setting. It's always dark and it's always light.